They thought I would kneel, that their institutions, money, bombs, and headlines would make me fold. They expected me to panic, issue an apology, and say the word they train leaders to say when they grow too bold, sorry. But I will not. Not because I enjoy defiance, but because I've seen the chains behind their smiles. History calls it diplomacy. I know it as surrender in a suit, and I was not made for surrender. When I spoke of Israel with truth instead of reverence, they said I'd crossed a line. Perhaps I did. The line of silence around Gaza, the line of complicity when they fund dictators then condemn uprisings. If so, I crossed it with open eyes and clenched fists. Kneeling only buys time, dollars, softer wars, but never freedom. So I do not kneel. They warned me. Calls came from Paris and Washington, telling me I'd gone too far. I laughed, not from disrespect, but clarity. They feared my voice, not my army. A voice that said what many think but dare not speak. Israel is not beyond criticism. Zionism is not immunity. Defending the oppressed is not terrorism. If we in the global South stay silent, we are complicit in the slow death of justice. They claim I started a fire. Let them. Sometimes fire clears fields overrun with weeds. But I did not start this one. They did when they bombed children and called it self-defense. When they made Africa a pawn and Palestine a graveyard. I only refuse to pretend there's no smoke. Yes, I have been threatened. But I would rather fall with honor than live with shame. This moment is not only political, it is generational. It is the time when the children of the colonized finally look their oppressors in the eye and say, "We are not afraid, and if my words shake their walls of power, so be it." I picked up this pen to write a new chapter for my people. Not an apology, but a declaration. I do not kneel, I do not break. The empire does not start with bombs. It begins with messages, whispers in protocol, meetings and calls, veiled warnings dressed as concern. First came diplomats I'd never met, ambassadors with polished smiles, advisors who draw maps with blood. They called it a diplomatic emergency, accused me of destabilizing the region and endangering Burkina Faso's image. Then came the phrase I know too well, "You need to fix this." Fix what? The truth, my backbone, my refusal to treat Israel like a god and Palestine like a ghost. I listened politely, as they expect African leaders to do. But I was done listening. Then Paris called, not ministers, but shadow contacts. They spoke of concern, jeopardized talks, isolation, and finally said the quiet part aloud. You've stepped beyond your place. That's what this is really about. The place they assigned us, the lines we cannot cross, the names we cannot speak. In their eyes, presidents like me should beg for aid, smile for photos, stay silent about Gaza. But I was not born for that role. Then came the Americans, skipping niceties, sanctions, delayed equipment, frozen assets. They said I threatened regional stability. Stability for who? For Israel bombing refugee camps. For arms dealers profiting from endless wars. That's not stability. It's a prison disguised as peace. Finally came Netanyahu's message, delivered through a senior official and carefully transcribed. This is his final warning. He must apologize, clarify that Israel is not an enemy, respect norms, or face consequences. Consequences, their favorite word for coercion. I sat with that message, let the silence wrap around it, then folded it. Not in acceptance, but rejection. I am not afraid of consequences. I fear only becoming another ghost who watched history from behind a curtain of obedience. I will not betray the people who trusted me to speak when no one else would. So let my answer be heard clearly. I will not apologize. I will not clarify. I will not be a puppet while the world burns. Let Netanyahu, Washington, Paris, and London hear me. Let the think tanks and media hear me. I owe no apology for being awake. When a nation speaks honestly, it is called a threat. When an African speaks with courage, he is called a radical. When a Muslim speaks with truth, he is called a terrorist. When a leader refuses to kneel, they send consequences. I send conviction. This is not about a single speech or pact. It is about the awakening of a people who have had enough. If the world thinks it can silence me with threats, it has forgotten what Burkina Faso is made of: revolution, resistance, and fire that refuses to die even under rubble. So yes, they issued a demand. And here is my response. Not whispered in a back room, but carved into history with fire. I will not apologize. I will not apologize for truth, for clarity, for naming what others fear to name. I will not apologize for standing with Palestine, whose blood speaks louder than rockets. I will not apologize for exposing double standards, selective outrage, and moral cowardice. If my words offend you more than Israel's bombs, you are the problem. If African resistance shakes you more than children screaming under rubble, you are the coward, not me. They want me to retract that Gaza is a prison. It is. That Israel commits war crimes. It does, and your own reports prove it. That the global South must break free from Zionist influence. It must. That our defense pact is a warning. It is a promise that Africa will no longer play dead while the world plays God. They call my speech dangerous. Yes, because truth is dangerous in the house of liars, and dignity threatens those who thrive on submission. They fear not my words alone, but the spark they represent. The day others refused to bow, they expected me to say, my comments were misunderstood, and we respect all partners. But I will not lie for their comfort. Truth is not a negotiation, it is a weapon, and I wield it proudly. I am not trying to start a war, but I will not pretend we are not already in one. A war of narratives, of surveillance, where silence is complicity and neutrality is surrender. Israel wages this war in our airwaves, parliaments and universities, buying silence with weapons contracts and smearing anyone who speaks Palestine without shame. Now they demand repentance. I am no priest. This is not confession, and I have no sins to wash away. It is my revolution. I did not enter this office to manage Burkina Faso. I came to free it from fear, dependency, and mental colonization. We do not need your loans, your lectures, or your fragile praise. We need truth and leaders willing to risk everything to speak it. I will be that leader, even if it costs me everything. I hear Netanyahu's threats and raise him the voice of millions who have waited generations to be heard. We are done with apologies. We want justice, dignity, and to leave this century with our backs straight and our hands clean. Israel may bomb its enemies but cannot bomb history. It may silence critics but not consequence. It may buy allies but not innocence. Those who fear my words should fear what I will say next. I speak not as a politician seeking applause, but as a man unafraid of becoming a warning. If my name must become the spark that burns a rotting system, so be it. Ibrahim Traoré does not apologize. He leads. I spoke because I have seen too much silence, buried too many truths, and watched too many leaders become fluent in cowardice. I did not come to play the part written by Paris, Washington, or Tel Aviv. I came to tear the script apart. I have walked the streets of Ouagadougou and seen young men whisper about Palestine as if freedom were only for others. I spoke because I recognized the pattern. The same tactics used against African movements are used against Palestine. Label rebels terrorists, call truth hate speech, call the dead collateral, and assassinate character or bodies. I remember Sankara, admired while plotted against, silenced with bullets. I remember Lumumba, tortured and dissolved in acid. I remember Gaddafi, not for his mistakes, but for the moment he called out NATO, and paid for it with Libya's heart. I remember every Palestinian child whose name the world never learned, whose blood dried before journalists arrived. So I spoke because someone had to. If they call it reckless, I ask was it reckless when Israel bombed a hospital, flattened apartments, raided mosques? Or is reckless a word they use when the weak resist? I am not anti-Israel. I am anti-colonialism, anti-occupation, anti-apartheid. If you confuse those, that is your problem. This is about a world that lets nations act with impunity for Western interests, a system that calls African lives cheap and Muslim voices dangerous. They said I should stay quiet to protect my people. But obedience is not protection, it is surrender dressed as strategy. Burkina Faso has been exploited, destabilized, and ignored even when we obeyed, complied, and begged. History does not remember the quiet. It remembers the voices that shook buildings, the fists that refused to unclench, the names they tried to erase and failed. I have seen the future. They want minerals for missiles, Foreign bases on our land while our schools collapse, praise for silence and punishment for pride, condemning the oppressed while applauding the occupiers. I reject that future. If my voice must be the wedge that splits it open, so be it. Let them fear what I said. Let them fear what I will say next. Let them fear that I will not go back to sleep. When one voice speaks with conviction, thousands remember their own. When one nation breaks its silence, it grows louder than any empire. I spoke because I saw a lie dressed as peace, because our children deserve dignity, not fear. And if that costs me my life, I die on my feet, unashamed. They call it dangerous. They call it reckless. They say it threatens world order. But what they mean is this: they are afraid. Afraid of a pact they do not control. An alliance they did not design. Nations no longer asking permission. This pact between Burkina Faso, Saudi Arabia, and Pakistan is not war, not provocation, not violence. It is a declaration of sovereignty. It is nations stepping out of Western and Israeli shadow to restore balance. Pakistan brings nuclear strength. Saudi Arabia brings oil and reach. Burkina Faso brings the spark, the audacity to say alliances of the oppressed are as valid as alliances of the powerful. The West is not angry because we broke the law, but because we broke their script. We were supposed to stay fragmented, chase loans, and never unite. But here we are, forging something they cannot translate or stop. And because we did not ask Washington or Tel Aviv first, they call it an act of war. They call their secret arms deals diplomacy. They call drone bases defense. But our defensive pact makes them panic. Why? Because this time we did not ask. This pact does not target civilians. It is not a sword. It is a shield. But make no mistake, it will be used if we must. If any state thinks it can bomb without consequence, it will now think twice. If any leader believes Africa is still soft ground, they will find steel under their boots. Burkina Faso is not alone anymore. This is what they fear. Not attack, but resistance. Not violence, but unity. Not silence, but one voice across continents saying, enough. Enough of Israeli aggression and Western silence. Enough of compromise while our people die. Enough of sovereignty as a Western privilege. This pact is not a threat. It is a warning. The sound of a new alignment being born. The end of the old rules. Those rules are gone. Now there is one touch one of us, and you answer to all of us. I know what they're planning behind closed doors. They will call it escalation. They will meet in Geneva, Brussels, Washington, pretending to discuss peace while demanding our submission. But we offer only a choice: respect us or confront us. Either way, we will no longer be invisible. Either way, we will no longer be alone. This pact is not made of signatures. It is made of memory, of martyrs of fire that survived a century of colonization and refused to die. It is made of a world not yet born but already breathing. And on the soil of Burkina Faso, I swear it will not be stillborn. Let them fear it. Let them twist it in headlines. Let them lie about it in parliaments. When the time comes, the world will remember we tried peace, we tried silence, we tried their game. When they denied us dignity, we built what they could never understand: unity. And now I speak directly to Israel, to Prime Minister Netanyahu, to the Western capitals that send warnings, to the media that calls me a danger, to the ambassadors who threaten my nation behind polite masks. I have heard your voices. Now you will hear mine. Israel says it is the only democracy in the Middle East. Then why does your democracy need checkpoints, surveillance towers, and apartheid walls? You call yourself the victim. But the victim does not drop white phosphorus on refugee camps, bulldoze homes with families inside, blockade, occupy, and assassinate with impunity. You ask why I named you. Because you built your reputation on silence and I broke it. Because you built your defense on guilt and I am immune to it. Because you built your power on the assumption no one would dare. And I dared, and I dare again. You are not above accountability. Not because I say so, but because justice does not require permission. Not because I am perfect, but because imperfect voices can still tell the truth. Not because I want conflict, but because I have seen what your peace does to the bones of children. You demanded my apology. Instead, I give you a mirror. Look into the faces of the dead in Rafah, in Jenin, in Khan Yunis. Look into the eyes of a 5-year-old boy standing in the rubble of a building you destroyed and ask if your morality can survive his memory. Mr. Netanyahu, your threats do not reach me. Your allies tried to contain me. Your media tried to smear me. Your intelligence whispered of destabilizing me. But I was born in destabilization. I am not afraid of sanctions. My people survived starvation by colonizers who wore suits instead of uniforms. I am not afraid of drones. I have lived with death long enough to shake its hand. You say you will make an example of me? I welcome it. Because if I fall, others will rise, and they will not ask permission before they speak. They will not tremble when they say your name. And to the west, you sit in air-conditioned offices, drinking coffee harvested by people who cannot afford shoes, and tell me to be reasonable. You told me to avoid inflammatory language, to consider regional stability. Where was your restraint when Israel bombed Al-Ali Hospital? Where was your concern for stability when NATO destroyed Libya? Where was your diplomacy when your oil companies looted our resources? You don't want peace. You want silence. You don't fear war. You fear resistance. You accuse me of extremism. Let's define it. If extremism is standing with the oppressed until they are free, I am an extremist. If it is refusing to betray the truth, I am an extremist. If it is rejecting a world order that feeds on African minerals while drowning us in debt, then write it on my forehead. But understand this, you cannot shame a man who does not serve your throne, and you cannot disarm a nation that has already tasted dignity. You say I've endangered Burkina Faso. No. You endangered us when you funded dictators and called them allies, when you trained mercenaries and called them consultants, when you embedded yourselves in our soil, our banks, our media, and blamed us when we bled. I only ended the illusion. You are not our saviors. You are the ones we must survive, and to the institutions, the UN, the IMF, the EU, and every other alphabet empire. You watched Palestine burn for decades and said nothing. You saw apartheid walls, sniper towers, nightly raids, and chose neutrality. You let Israel define the terms, redraw the maps, and censor the truth. Now you cry foul when someone breaks the silence. Spare me your outrage. It's worth nothing, like your resolutions, your sanctions, your staged tears. If history is watching, let it see this clearly. We are no longer afraid, no longer begging, no longer silent. Let them call this speech dangerous. Let them fear the words of a man who refused to kneel. Let them gather in war rooms and newsrooms to spin this moment, but I know something they do not. You cannot kill an idea whose time has come. This is not rebellion. This is resurrection. Let them fear what we are becoming, because this time we are not asking. We are declaring. And if that declaration sounds like war to those who have ruled unchallenged for too long, it is because they have forgotten what freedom sounds like. Let them remember it now in my voice, in our pact, in the silence I refuse to keep. I did not come here to please. I did not come here to beg. I came here to tell the truth. I do not apologize. I do not kneel. I do not flinch. I do not forgive. And if this is my final speech, let it echo, let it burn. Let it build the future they were never prepared for.